Something about the cozy comfort of Boris's home aided my recovery. It was only about 3 meters by 6 meters. Boris had a place for everything and everything in its place philosophy that meant it never felt cramped. The simple rectangle also had an airlock, which was a word I knew, but not in this context. Sensing my newness and without anything else to do, Boris started explaining things about the island we found ourselves on. Misery loves company, so I suppose there was some comfort in knowing that he and most everyone on the island arrived in the same fashion I had. To this day, I do not know what Boris saw in me and why he decided to help acclimatize me to this new life, but once I was well enough to be up and about, the first thing I wanted to do was stop being such a burden. Boris had been nothing but generous with his supplies, but clearly feeding 2 people had strained his resources. So, knowing he could not talk me out of helping, he suggested a nearby abandoned supermarket might not be totally looted. While it was raining lightly, I did not even care, as it felt calm and cooling after being stuck in the tiny jungle hut recuperating. Realizing this was my first time outdoors on the island and not under the threat of immediate death must have put some pep in my step. "Slow down there, kid, I'm not as young as I look," laughed Boris. And was then I noticed for the first time he had a very distinct limp. "You don't look a day over 100, I joked right back at him, as joking was an easy thing to do with this man. "Are you okay? Looks like you got a bit of a limp there." Boris shrugged his shoulders. "Yeah, it's funny too, because I've had this for as long as I can remember, but don't know how I got it. Gets worse when it's raining like this." He chuckled in a certain kind of way. In the years to come, I would know that certain way was Boris, but at the time I did not know him well enough to tell the difference. When the supermarket was in sight, I was a little worried about just how quiet it was. Boris brushed right by me and demonstrated a lightness of foot that I had already seen and had been impressed by from someone so large. Atop a table in a dark interior room, he was excited to find a green key card and go on to begin my instruction on his rules of acquisition that explained things like what loot was worth keeping versus not, what boxes to search and where they might be, how cards like this could give access to even better loot. He showed me a fascinating device called a recycler that broke down items into their components, and I learned of the existence of a local currency called scrap. I felt overwhelmed at first, but with Boris at my side, that feeling never turned into worry. That being said, there was an infectious excitement as he spoke that frankly scared me a little. An underlying greed that seemed to originate not from our own inherent wants or desires, but seemed to infuse us nonetheless. I managed to shake it off quickly, but Boris seemed to have a tougher time doing so. It was while sharing a can of beans next to the clangorous, churning recycler, a gleam in his eye solely focused on the components being doled out, that we were ambushed. The boom of a double-barreled shotgun and sight of my new friend crumpling to the ground was my second to last sight. The last was a pair of crossbow bolts sticking out of my chest, as I too slid lifelessly to the ground, only to have my vision fade away forever to the sight of a leather-clad man crouching repeatedly on my head.